Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Tuesday, January 29th. A little Maurice Chevalier for you. Vive la France. Hey, they came through in Mali. I'll get into that in a bit. As far as an update, they prevented Al-Qaeda from taking over that country. We, on the other hand, failed to put together a no-fly zone in Syria in the first few months of that conflict. Over 60,000 dead with incalculable consequences going forward. So go French. Dow Jones finished up again today at 13,955. About half of 1%. It is only about 100 points from the all-time high of 14,164. S&P 500 is at 1507, and that is 58 points from its all-time high. Both of those were set October 9th of 2007. But NASDAQ was unchanged at 3153. A reading on consumer confidence plunged to 58.6 this month, the weakest since November of 2011, and down from a revised 66.7 in December. Of course, the 2% payroll tax increase, the first of the year, probably hasn't helped much. Tomorrow we have our first look at fourth quarter GDP. Estimates are generally from 1 to 1.5%. Home builder D.R. Horton saw its shares near a 6-year high today on strong earnings. Orders jumped 39% in the quarter. The S&P Case-Shiller Index of property values in the 12 months to November showed an increase of 5.5% over November 2011. The biggest year-over-year gain since August of 2006. By the way, the Phoenix market is now up 22.8% year-over-year, November to November. Shares in Ford Motor fell about down about 5%. Its losses in Europe are now estimated at $2 billion for this year. It wasn't so long ago that Ford was estimating losses of $1 billion in Europe. Then they hiked it to $1.5 billion, and now it's $2 billion. But I thought the worst was over in Europe. Overall, Ford's earnings beat expectations. Revenues were up 13% in North America. So it's autos and housing driving the U.S. economy, as well as the energy boom. That is good. So far this earnings season, S&P 500 revenues are coming in up about 3.8%, or double estimates. So that's also positive. Overseas in Tokyo, I just want to mention something that as their market continues to rally, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his government have a 68% approval rating. Not too bad. Okay, back to Europe. European Central Bank President Mario Draghi is very concerned over the mess at Italy's third largest bank, Monte dei Paschi di Siena, and he met with Italy's finance minister. As I wrote in my last week in review column, this was a huge derivatives debacle where a 3.9 billion euro bailout of the bank threatens to upset the election in 4 weeks, with both caretaker Prime Minister Mario Monti as well as the Bank of Italy facing the ire of the center-right opposition, i.e. Silvio Berlusconi. The bank has close ties to the center-left party, which is leading in the polls. Supposedly a Bank of Italy inspection of Monte dei Paschi discovered the risky derivatives contracts back in the summer of 2010. The other day, however, Berlusconi praised Benito Mussolini for having been a good leader and defended the dictator for allying himself with Hitler. As if this wasn't bad enough, Berlusconi made the statements in Milan on Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was back in 1938 that Mussolini passed social laws barring Jews from Italy's universities and many professions. In Germany, Angela Merkel has a personal approval rating of about 65%, but her party, the Christian Democrats, has been polling far less in state elections, like a recent one in Lower Saxony where the Christian Democrats received just 36%. So Merkel needs a coalition partner, and that has been the pro-business Free Democratic Party, but the FDP has seen their numbers plunge from 15% since the last general election in 2009 to about 2% today. You need 5% to gain seats in Parliament, and of course we have an election in Germany coming up in September, a rather important one. Well, that 2% was before allegations against the FDP leader, 67-year-old Rainer, brutally came out in a first-person account in mass circulation Stern magazine. 29-year-old German journalist Laura Himmelreich says brutally made lewd comments to her, such as when brutally was at a bar chatting with reporters when he looked at Himmelreich and remarked, "You could fill out a dirndl." If you don't know what a dirndl is, think St. Pauli girl. Anyway, Merkel will have to look to the Social Democrats for a grand coalition, it would appear. But their leader, Peter Steinbrück, is a goofball himself, suggesting last month that Merkel was popular because she gets a women's bonus from female voters. I don't think Merkel has a problem when it comes to the election, but trying to find some partners, that is a problem. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu told a congressional delegation yesterday the policy choices for dealing with Syria are between bad, bad, and worse. Foremost on everyone's mind in Israel, the Prime Minister told members of the House Armed Services Committee, is the stockpile of chemical weapons. And then you have the issue of what follows Assad. U.S. Ambassador Dan Shapiro said either the regime will use chemical weapons against the Syrian people or will transfer the chemical weapons to Hezbollah or other extremist organizations. As even Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said a few days ago, if Assad gives the order, Syria's chemical weapons can be used within hours. So in Syria itself, 65 bodies were found in Aleppo, hands tied behind their backs, executed, shot in the head. We found the bodies in a river there. They're still bringing the bodies up, so the death toll could rise to about 100 from this single incident. Apparently killed by forces loyal to Assad, but then the regime says it was the act of terrorists. So after I called out the Obama administration yesterday, the Washington Post had some of the following in an editorial today. It might seem as though the horrors of Syria, where more than 60,000 have died violently in the last 22 months, could not grow worse. Yet steadily, week by week, they do. One measures the refugee flows. In the past month, more than 30,000 people have fled to neighboring Jordan alone, threatening to overwhelm an already unstable monarchy. More than 200,000 Syrians are now in Lebanon, 150,000 in Turkey, and 75,000 in Iraq, according to the UN. A group of U.S. senators recently visited a camp, heard horrific stories of the ongoing crimes by the regime of Bashar Assad, as well as bitter complaints that Western countries, in particular the United States, are doing little or nothing to help. In speaking about Syria in recent days, Senator John Kerry and President Obama described not a strategy for stopping a bloodbath that threatens vital U.S. interest, but rather a series of excuses for inaction. In an interview with the New Republic published over the weekend, and I mentioned this yesterday, Mr. Obama wondered how to weigh the thousands dying in Syria against the thousands being killed in the Congo, as if all wars are equal importance to the United States, or the inability to solve every problem means America should not help even when it can. Not for the first time, Mr. Obama also asked whether U.S. intervention could trigger even worse violence or the use of chemical weapons. The president asked the same question a year ago, and the answer is now known. In the absence of U.S. action, the violence grew far worse, and the Assad regime moved dangerously close to chemical weapons. The United States could do much to shape the course of events in Syria without using American troops. It could begin providing aid directly to Syrian refugee organizations and civilian councils inside the country, as France has done for months. It could provide arms to moderate rebel factions so that they can compete with the jihadists, and so that they will look to the United States when the war is over. That's what I've been saying for at least 19 of the 22 months. Continued passivity will ensure that the crisis in Syria continues to worsen, along with the consequences for the United States. That was an editorial in the Washington Post today. And just a word on the 60 Minutes interview Steve Kroft did with Obama and Hillary Clinton. I watched Fox last night, O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, and everyone was getting on Kroft for not being hard-hitting with his questions. If you didn't see my video of yesterday, watch it. Kroft wasn't at fault. He elicited a comment on Syria, and Obama hung himself with his answer. To me, that was a good reporter. Turning to Mali, in the key city of Gao, it's payback time, with suspected Islamists being hunted and beaten. Picture: for about a year, the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist had banned music and insisted women cover themselves, but the French and the Malian soldiers came in and restored order. Timbuktu is back under government control, but not before the Islamist bastards burned one of the historic libraries and thousands of ancient manuscripts, some going back to the year 1300. There are problems in the northeast with the Tuaregs, a secular rebel group, but no apparent French casualties. President Francois Hollande suggested that French troops might soon stop their northward advance, leaving it to African soldiers to pursue the militants into their readouts in the desert north. We are winning this battle, Mr. Hollande said. When I say we, this is the Malian army, this is the Africans supported by the French. He continued, now the Africans can take over. French Defense Minister Le Drian said France has two objectives in Mali: to halt a militant advance toward the south and to seize control of population centers in the north, and both have been achieved. The mission has been fulfilled, he said. And also today, Britain announced it would deploy 330 military personnel to help the French, specifically help train soldiers in Mali and neighboring countries for use in Mali afterwards. So kudos to Prime Minister David Cameron and his government. In North Korea, South Korea's defense ministry said today it believes North Korea has basically completed its nuclear test preparations. One problem, it's very difficult to know when Pyongyang actually conducts it because it's conducted underground and you're relying on highly sensitive monitoring equipment to confirm it. So Seoul, Washington et al. Will rely to a certain extent on North Korea's own announcements. The difference is differentiating between seismic and low-frequency sound waves. I didn't know this. Earthquakes don't produce the sound variety, so I'm told. Well, that's all for today. I'm going to try something a little different here. We lost a great man in music the other day, Leroy Bonner, front man for the Ohio Players. Just bear with me. Remember the men and women of our armed forces. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Congratulations so far to the French soldiers. Keep them safe. They're helping keep us safe. Take care.